Hi, I'm Dave Wurzel, and you're watching PHTV4 Spotlight. Today in Spotlight, we're going to talk about bike maintenance. We are in the middle of summer here. People hopefully get a chance to get on the trails, ride around the neighborhood, whatever their hobby is. And you might, I'm guessing, we're here because the bike needs to be maintained, not just to continue the ride, but also to keep the ride safe, right? So, Rich, what I want to ask you about, for bike maintenance, what are the types of things that somebody can do at home, they can manage at home, without necessarily have to bring it in? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about when do you cross the line and like, okay, now you need to see somebody. Before I give you a chance to talk about that, why are you the expert that I should be asking? How long have you been in the bike business?
Well, Dave, let me tell you, we've been in the bike business for 45 years. It was my first job back when I was 15 years old, and it's been the only thing I've known since that time. I've been walking through this door for about 45 years now, and don't plan on making a change. So
I'm going to guess, based on that longevity, you've probably seen almost every bike maintenance issue you can. Am I?
Oh, yes. We've seen things that just baffled us like you can't imagine, but generally speaking, we can still fix them. So.
Okay. You know, I almost don't want to say this. It's embarrassing. I brought my bike in one time. It was making a funny noise. I couldn't figure it out. And the first thing one of you guys says, well, how about if we take this leaf out of here first? Sound was gone. That's a nothing. But we're going to talk about real bike maintenance things that you guys have to deal with versus what I can do. What can I do at home?
Biggest thing I would tell you is keep the bike clean. First and foremost. Generally, if you're riding on the street, don't necessarily have to clean it every day. But if you clean it, every fifth, seventh ride, something like that's usually good. So clean the bike. After you're done cleaning it, you want to lube the chain. The chain is the one thing that, not to sound silly, but it is the weak link based on the idea that it's exposed to all the elements and stuff. So after you clean the bike, you wipe it down. I know you and I were talking earlier, you just use a rag, perfectly fine, it'll work great. Take the rag, wipe all the gunk off of the chain, and then put a lubricant back on it. That's very important. It's probably the number one thing that folks can do. The other thing that's really important is your tire pressure.
Thanks. One quick question first about cleaning the bike chain. Can I just run a rag? Now, like, I know I've used WD-40 to do that. I hope it's not a bad idea to clean it. I think, and I know you guys have a bike cleaner or chain cleaner here. Does it matter what I clean it with?
Actually, if you're using WD-40, it's great. That would be perfectly fine. It's easy to use, and a lot of times it's in the house already. So again, spray it into a rag, wrap it around the chain, and just pedal the bike backwards. Very simple to do. And what you're doing with that is you're cleaning it off. Now, also WD-40 is a lubricant, but the problem with it is somewhat water-based, and it evaporates rather quickly. So the lubricants that we have that actually go back on the chain will hold up longer, and it'll help to keep your chain lasting longer as well.
So that's a good distinction. Clean the bike chain, but you're not lubricating with WD-40.
No.
You clean it, you want the chain to dry off, and then apply one of the various lubricants. And I know you have different types depending on the type of riding you're doing. And then you were going to talk about the tire pressure, right?
Tire pressure, very critical. Most of the tires that are out on the market today have a range of pressure. And some may say 60 is the low side, they may go up as high as 80 pounds. Depending on your riding style, the more air that you put into the tire, the less rolling resistance you get. That's good, but it also might make for a little bit harsher ride. If that is the case, then you drop the air pressure down, but always go into that range. Again, if it says 60 to 80, be somewhere in between 60 and 80 pounds. And that's something that I would suggest checking, if not every ride, every other ride, because when a bike does sit still and there's nothing going on, it does tend to lose air pressure. It's very common. Sometimes they lose 5 pounds, sometimes they lose 10 pounds. But in the same sense, though, too, they will lose some air pressure. So you may start today on your ride at 60 pounds, come back, put the bike away, 2 days later it might be down to 50 or that. And if that's the case, then you're out of the range and you want to get back into it. So
I guess at that point you're risking damage to the tire or the rim, or the ride won't be as safe probably.
And again, too, it's also, as a rider, it's making it a little more difficult for you to push the bike. The other thing too, like you had made a point, riding along one of the trails and you come across a pothole. If you hit a pothole with a low air pressure tire, what you can do is damage the rim. Then it starts to get kind of costly. It's not just getting a pinch flat and losing a tube. You could be replacing a rim. So you want to keep it up there.
All right, so Lubricant, clean the chain, lubricant, those sound like things I definitely can do. Tire pressure, definitely check it, easy to check. Get a bike pump and I can do that myself, or find a air pressure gauge. Anything else I can do at home, or are we going to start to hit the line now where, no, that's something you need to go to the bike shop for?
I'm going to say at that point it might be maybe your next step is going to the bike shop, and basically because if you're riding along and you're starting to hear things that don't sound right, there's something wrong. Something's out of adjustment. You need to bring it in at that point. That's where we can at least diagnose what it is. You could possibly be a very simple adjustment. It could be something a little more involved. But I would say if you stuck with those basics and then anything from there, the one thing I tell most of our customers, if something doesn't sound right, look right, or feel right, come and see us. It only takes a little bit of your time to come by. We'll take a look at it and see, give you an idea what's going on with it and stuff. And then if we need to fix it, it might be something really simple. It could be something complex. So.
And I've noticed that if my, like the gear shift, the derailleurs, I hope I'm saying right, if they're off a little bit, the bike doesn't shift as well, or I get a little noise because something's rubbing against something, and that's really not something. To me, that feels more like an art form at that point, adjusting them.
That is definitely an art form. The way that the new bikes are set up, they're what's called indexed shifting, and basically that's very reliant on how much tension is on the cable. That's one of those things that if you've never done it before, it's not a real easy thing to do. It's something you just got to kind of practice with, and then you learn. That's how most of our guys have done it. And again, it's a lot of times that's a very simple fix, but you'll notice it through your hearing. You'll hear the noise. You might even feel it, and something just kind of grinding or something like that. So, like I say, those are the times you really should probably come in and see us.
That sounds like good advice. If it doesn't sound right or feel right, let's bring it in. Or look right. And then I imagine the same thing with the brakes at that point too. The brakes should be pretty consistent. I mean, you should be able to brake when you need to brake.
If you're grabbing those brake handles and that bike's not stopping, there's a problem. The other thing too with a lot of the new bikes now, they have disc brakes on them, and disc brakes do have a tendency sometimes to squeak. And that's partly just because the pads start to get a little bit dry. Very frequently we see it happen in the middle of summer, late summer, because it's just very dry outside. And we do have, again, a lubricant that can go on there, and it helps to keep them quieted down and stuff. But again, obviously brakes are very important. So.
All right, good advice there. And so I'm going to ask you about one other type of bike, because I feel like I'm seeing them all the time on the trails, a little bit on the streets, is an e-bike. I'm guessing most of the maintenance is the same, but there's probably something different there. So like if I have an e-bike, so what applies and doesn't apply? Where does it change to what we can do or not do?
I would go as far as to say 75% of an e-bike is a traditional bicycle. So the brakes that are on there, the gears that are on there, adjustments on seats, adjustments on handlebars and things like that are all basically the same amongst all those bikes, e-bike or non-e-bike.
So if I have an e-bike, I can clean the chain, and I should be checking the tire pressure on it. And then the other stuff, just like we talked about, that would come to you. What's the other 25% you mentioned?
That's where we get a little tricky. Right now in the industry, there's a lot of different manufacturers of the electronics. And part of the problem with that is accessibility to those parts that you may need to become very hard to get a hold of. The other thing is diagnosing the problems too. A lot of the bikes that we carry basically are set up so that we more or less plug them into a computer and they run a diagnostic on it. So it's very easy for us to determine what's wrong. When we come across bikes that are not, I'll say, a bike shop bike, unfortunately some of the ones that are purchased online and stuff, the accessibility of those parts that we might need, such as a controller, a battery, motor for that matter, are very hard to come by, and also very hard to diagnose because we don't have that diagnostic system for it. So be a little cautious with it. Again, like I say, everything that we carry, we service, and again, very easy to do too. So.
Sounds like good advice for somebody thinking about an e-bike, where they're purchasing it, and then what's the follow-up like if I need service with the electronic portion of that bike, right?
That's where it gets tricky. And again, like I say, if you've purchased it from a dealer, most likely they're going to be able to take care of it. But if you've purchased online, sometimes it gets a little tough to work with. Again, like I say, it's just the accessibility of parts is very hard to come by. So.
Okay. All right. Well, very good advice there. And again, I'm thinking about plugging it in, diagnosing. It's almost like, and that's what they do with cars.
We're right about there as cars are right now. It's if you think about it, and again, being in this business for 45 years, you know, we went from brakes that worked against the rim to disc brakes like a car has, and now we have electronics on the bicycles like cars have, and then we're diagnosing them like they are in a car. So some similarities.
Right. So not to discourage, I see an e-bike in my future, but if you're getting it, you want to think about the follow-up part to it, right?
Very important. Again, traditional bike, I'll say a little bit easier for just the average person to work with, but when it comes to the electronics and stuff on an e-bike, that's where I would say get the backing of some sort of a dealership, or at least online, some type of backing and stuff.
Okay. Rich, thanks a lot. I really appreciate your tips and advice on bike maintenance, what we can do, and maybe we need to turn over to you.
Bring it on by. We'll be glad to take care of it.
All right. Thanks again, Rich. I'm Dave Worsley. You've been watching PHTV4 Spotlight. Today we've been talking about bike maintenance with Rich at Richard's Bicycles in Palos Heights. Thank you for watching.